Trump says he might meet Putin in Saudi Arabia after call on Ukraine. President Trump said Wednesday that he might meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Saudi Arabia. Why it matters. Trump made the comment a few hours after speaking with Putin in their first publicly disclosed call since Trump took office. Trump said they had agreed on starting negotiations immediately to end the war in Ukraine, which is approaching its third anniversary. Trump also seemed to make key concessions on Ukraine's behalf ahead of any such talks, saying, "I don't think it is practical for Ukraine to have NATO membership, and that it's unlikely that Ukraine gets all of its land back." However, Trump later said that he thought some of that land will come back to Ukraine. Earlier on Wednesday, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth had ruled out a role for U.S. troops in guaranteeing Ukraine's post-war security and called on Ukraine to give up on reclaiming all of its occupied territory. The latest. Speaking to reporters in the Oval Office, Trump floated the idea of meeting Putin in Saudi Arabia, along with the Saudi Crown Prince. He did not lay out a timeline and said, between the lines. In an interview with The Economist published on Wednesday, Zelensky had said he'd had little contact with Trump's team and raised concerns about any decision-making on Ukraine taking place without Kyiv's involvement. Zoom in, Trump wrote on Truth Social that his call with Putin was lengthy and highly productive, and that they discussed Ukraine, the Middle East, energy, artificial intelligence, the power of the dollar, and other issues. We each talked about the strengths of our respective nations and the great benefit that we will someday have in working together. But first, as we both agreed, we want to stop the millions of deaths taking place in the war with Russia/Ukraine, Trump wrote. Trump added that during the call Putin used his campaign motto of common sense. We both believe very strongly in it. He said they both agreed to work closely together and visit each other's countries. Driving the news. The call came a day after the U.S. and Russia implemented a deal for the release of American detainee Mark Fogel. On Wednesday, one U.S. citizen and two Belarusian nationals, one of whom worked for Radio Liberty, were released from detention by the Belarusian government, two White House officials said. A White House official said the three are currently at the U.S. Embassy in Lithuania, and their identity wasn't being released out of respect for their privacy. The official said the U.S. didn't release any prisoners in return. The U.S. did release a Russian crypto hacker named Alexander Vinnik as part of the exchange for Fogel, two White House officials said. Vinnik was extradited to the U.S. in 2022 and 2 years later pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit money laundering. In recent months, he'd been awaiting sentencing. As part of the deal, Vinnik is forfeiting $100 million in digital assets to the U.S. government, the White House officials said. Behind the scenes, White House officials say the deal to release Fogel was in the works for many days but took its final shape in the last 72 hours. White House National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and officials from the State Department and the CIA were all involved in the negotiations. One of the people involved on the Russian side was the head of Russia's Sovereign Wealth Fund, Kirill Dmitriev, Witkoff told reporters on Wednesday. He was bridging between the two sides, Witkoff said. Another key mediator was Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who Witkoff said was instrumental in getting the deal. He has a very strong friendship with President Trump. He encouraged and pushed behind the scenes. He was a cheerleader for the deal and for the two leaders to come together, Witkoff said. Trump said bin Salman would likely take part in his potential meeting with Putin. What's next? Trump said he asked Waltz, Witkoff, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and CIA Director John Ratcliffe to lead the negotiations with Russia and Ukraine. Trump wrote on Truth Social after his call with Zelensky that Vice President Vance and Rubio will meet Zelensky on Friday in Munich to start discussing peace talks with Russia.